Well, hello everyone. Good day and welcome to Seed Speaks. This is a video series brought to you by Seed World Group. My name is Mark Zienkiewicz and I am an editor with Seed World Group. This month we're talking with people from across the industry about challenges in the realm of human resources. Today we're talking with three experts about returning to the office. Now, this is a big topic at the moment for obvious reasons. We're going to talk about how people in our industry are impacted and how you can deal with questions surrounding employees returning to an office environment. A lot of us have been working from home for the past number of months. And as we slowly begin to turn the corner on this pandemic, many of us are going back to an office environment, and it's causing challenges for everybody. People have questions, concerns, and that's what we're going to deal with today. I am joined by Crain Reed. He is Chief Procurement Officer for Corteva AgriScience based in Indiana. Welcome, Crain.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We also have Jade Reeve. She is Program Manager at the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. Welcome, Jade.
Thank you very much for having me.
And last but not least, we have Mark Metcalfe, President of Nexeed based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Good day, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this topic, I'd just like to learn a little bit about each of you and specifically about your working situation over the course of the pandemic. We'll start with you, Jade. Jade, how has your work situation been affected over the past number of months, and what's happening right now for you with regard to your working arrangements?
Yes, so we've been working remotely as a whole team. Our entire staff has been working from home since March of 2020. And we thought we may return last fall, but then there was a wave in Ontario where things shut down and we were, mandatory working from home. So we've continued that model, and as a staff have been, just in discussions about when we're returning, when everyone is doubly vaccinated. So that's the way we are proceeding. And also we have staff with children. So a lot needed flexibility given there were a lot of periods of remote learning for the children when schools were closed.
Yes, vaccinations. That's a topic that we'll get to in a moment. Actually, that's a big one. Mark, what about you? How have you been affected these past number of months? Have you worked from home? You worked from the office? A little bit of both. How did that play out for you?
It's been a little bit of both. And along the way, there's been a few different shifts in how we were organizing our group. When the pandemic started, we had 8 full-time and 2 part-time, and everybody came to the office every day. Immediately, we split into 2 teams because we were concerned about trying to completely separate the 2 groups or make 2 groups that could be separated, because we can't, there's quite a bit of our work can be done remotely, but we handle physical goods. We have to ship and receive things. There's just a necessity for some of the function to occur at the office, and we couldn't take a chance on having everyone be a close contact with one person who was sick. So we initially went that way, and since then we've had a few different versions of this where it was more just a small number of people in what is a pretty big space, and masks on and all that kind of stuff. So my personal situation has been very much a hybrid, and I there's been some aspects about that have been good. I like the variety of being at home a little bit, and I've noticed on stretches where I do come in 3, 4, 5 days in a row, that gets a little tiring too. So I'm pretty sympathetic to some of the advantages that come with being at home. But at the same time, something that I've really noticed lately is some real challenges around some of the informal or the lack of some of the informal communication that you would get when we're here, when we're all together. And so, some things we were able to organize ourselves to make sure we were covering them off on Zoom or on different meetings, or making sure that people were in at the same time. But in a small group like we have, a lot of things just happen kind of organically or naturally because we're all here. And so now I'm really starting to think about when we come back, how will we do that? Because we absolutely must return to some of those informal meetings that occur and just to get the team back together.
Exactly, yeah, and we'll chat about that as well, how people can navigate those different situations. Craig, what's your work world looked like these past number of months, and what does it look like for the near future?
Oh, thanks for the question. And it's interesting. I think both Jay and Mark situation is very similar to mine and to ours as overall Corteva. Just as a company, March of last year, we essentially made the move to have a large portion of our workforce work remotely due to the COVID pandemic. But of course, we had individuals that needed to be on site, which we call really site essential personnel as well. So we have this twofold workforce today globally. It's really driving work on behalf of the company. I personally, just based on my role, went into a remote working environment, and probably like many on the line here have worked in many places throughout my home, first floor, second floor, as we've continued to adjust your work arrangement personally to be comfortable in an environment that's been shifting. But at our company, it's very much been a journey over the last 16 months to really assess the current situation relative to the pandemic, but also starting to take a future view to what does the post-pandemic world look like for us from a company perspective. And we've been spending a lot of time really strategizing and building out for the company what that new situation will look like for us.
Well, and that's the next thing I wanted to chat about was some areas of concern at your particular organizations. And Craig, you mentioned that that's a big concern right now is how do we design that future workplace? What is this going to look like? Who can work from home? Who needs to come back to the office? Do we have a hybrid model? For you personally, what are the major concerns surrounding that? What are you wrestling with right now as you sort of look to that future work environment for yourself and say, okay, what do I need to do here? Obviously, we all learned some things during the pandemic that, hey, I could do this from home. I don't have to go to the office to do this, but maybe there's other things that's like, I do need to be in an office for this. And Craig, how are you personally going about designing this new work plan for yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. And, fortunately, I'm actually, I have the great fortune of working with a cross-functional team across Corteva globally that I'm leading that has this responsibility for the company. And so for us today, we've realized that there's a large portion of our workforce that would like to continue in some form of flexible model. The flexibility that they've been able to have working at home, being able to truly drive and bring their whole selves to work in multiple ways is something that we realize is of importance to the overall workforce. We've spent some time really assessing and surveying our workforce to understand really what is it that you would like to do as we continue to go forward. And we've gotten some really great feedback, first and foremost, in terms of how the current work arrangement is affecting them being 100% remote. What are some of the challenges that they're seeing? But then also, as we look into the future, what are some of the things that you would like to see more of? With that as the backdrop, and also looking at the company strategy and its vision and the things that we've outlined that we want to drive as Corteva AgriScience, we partnered that with the strategy of saying, what can we build in that can satisfy the requirements of our workforce, but also meet the requirements of the business? And, we have 22,000 employees globally. So we had to build a solution that was basically tailored to satisfy our entire global population. And so we've gone with the flexible model that essentially takes into account that we will have site dedicated resources that will need to continue to work 5 days a week on site. We have a set of resources that can be flexible, and we're looking at that 1 to 4 days a week. And then we have a subset of our workforce that can be remote. And if that work can be done remote and still meet the requirements of your role, region, and work requirements, we're assessing that as well. So for us, it's how do we provide the most flexibility that continues to meet the business needs and requirements, as we continue to meet the overall requirements of our employee base as well.
Yeah, Jade, what about at the Resource Council as you guys look to develop that new plan? What are the requirements that you guys are finding you're going to need moving forward as a Resource Council? You mentioned you're sort of looking right now at, well, do we have a hybrid model? What do we do moving into the future? For you guys, what are the top concerns in developing that new plan?
Absolutely. Well, what Mark mentioned was a key part of that plan in terms of those smaller conversations, the sort of, the water cooler talk, where you can really move things along without those scheduled meetings. And that's what we've found we've missed as well, and heard from our partners when we're providing HR support to other ag associations. So in terms of that plan, definitely connecting the employees with employers and having that dialogue and being able to understand what they need in terms of their requirements, and our staff as well, what we will need to move forward within that plan. A hybrid model certainly is favorable for a lot of employees, but we've been assessing our space, and it will depend on the size of your space as to whether or not you can be connected in a group. Even with vaccinations, there are distance requirements. So we can't necessarily have those informal conversations the same way either. So one of our things that we're looking at is being able to use and leverage existing tools such as Zoom, such as Slack, such as Microsoft Teams, to be able to encourage those less informal conversations. Certainly Slack's been a great tool for that, to continue that chat, which is, focused on a particular topic rather than an entire, bleh, where everyone's talking and you have to sort of filter through to find something. But if you can have specific chats for those things, that really helps teams. Yeah.
Well, and Mark, you're in a unique situation right now at Nexeed because you guys are actually, I understand, building a new facility. And so not only is the pandemic sort of turning the corner and you're talking about this future model of having people come back to the office, but you're doing this while you're actually building a new facility. And so what kind of challenges are coming as a result of that? Because in some ways, I imagine it might be a little bit easier if, people are coming back to your previous office, you kind of know how things are going to work. But now you've got this new facility to deal with, people coming back maybe to a facility that they've never been to before. So that must be an interesting challenge for you, I'm sure.
Putting together a construction project in the middle of the pandemic has had some interesting points to it. In fact, the new space, which should be ready to go late this year or maybe January, we're going to have more office space than we do here. We're a little cramped right now. One of the reasons we need to move is because we're really almost, if we wanted to add one more person, we don't really have anywhere for them. And so by getting some people remote, we were able to spread out a little bit more. And when we have the new place, it will accommodate everyone plus a bit. We kind of built for longer term, little extra space for some growth, and we'll probably be using that space. So in that regard, I think it might be, it will alleviate any concerns that people may have about, ventilation and too many people and not enough space and that kind of stuff. And I think that, the group does recognize some of the things that we're missing by doing this. So the flexibility that I see us offering is probably, the details are all to be determined, right? But I don't know yet, and it'll be fluid. We're going to have to learn how to how do we know that the work's getting done and on time and everything. These are things that may need to shift around a little, but the principle that I have in mind is some flexibility, but most of the people in most of the time. So, that's kind of where I'm hoping to land is a happy medium with fairly healthy amount of work from the office.
It's an interesting situation, and I'll open up the floor to you guys. Could the office actually become more important after the pandemic? And when I say more important, I don't necessarily mean that everybody must go back to an office, but it sort of begs this question of, okay, like, obviously there maybe are some things that can be done from home, but there are some things that would be ideal if everybody or certain people could be at the office for that. And so could this kind of prompt people to sort of prioritize when the office is needed, and in that way maybe the office even becomes more important than it was before? Because before we were all like, well, we have to go into the office, that's just what we do. And now it's like, well, if I am going to go into the office, I'm going there for a purpose because it's important for me to go there. Do you guys maybe see that happening, that the office in some ways playing a more important role after the pandemic?
Yeah, we see it. And we, as a part of the cross-functional team that we're working with, have one really focused 100% on our workspace. And what does that mean? And it won't be something that will happen overnight. It will actually be a journey in terms of what happens from a transformation standpoint. But we do feel like the office will have multiple purposes, and they will be very specific and distinct in terms of why you're going into the office, what you're using it for, how you're engaging there. And it will need to be very deliberate also as we move back into this new operating model.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I mean, in terms of collaboration with other colleagues, I think it's extremely important. Um, the Zoom fatigue is real, and there's been reports on that. So being able to have that face-to-face is very important, as well as thinking about onboarding, bringing new people into an organization. It's tricky to be able to support them and make sure that they're feeling connected to the team if they've started during this pandemic. So being able to connect back in a space would be really helpful.
Totally agree with that one, Jade. And I think, the flip side of what Craig mentioned is perhaps also just as important, is if we're going to be at home, what tasks can I do at home and what ones are way more efficient or better suited to time at the office. And I think during the pandemic, when we've had people in and out, we've had to spend a little more time thinking about what needs to be done and when does it need to be done. And so that those who are going to be at home have something that's doable from there. And save the stuff that you need to do at the office for the office, but make sure that you've kind of planned out what you want to work on at home so that you're not sitting there wondering, well, here I am, the computer's on, now what?
Yeah,
we just maybe
sorry,
the
go ahead,
last
Craig.
comment. No, just the last comment, and I think which is what we're all getting after is we've seen, the office environment, already has the company culture embedded in it. And so the key there is how do you maintain that company culture throughout whatever arrangement you will have post this pandemic scenario in terms of going back into that environment. And I think we're all spending a lot of time really thinking about how do we make sure we maintain it. That's one that we're very much focused on. And to your point, Mark, being in the office or at home, you have to be very deliberate in terms of how we're thinking about that from a company standpoint.
Well, I think what I'm hearing from you guys is that we have a real opportunity here to create a sense of camaraderie, unity among the staff, connection, I think was the word you used, Jade. Craig, I think you used the term deliberate, creating a more deliberate environment. And so I think this presents real opportunity for a lot of employers. And we received a question from our audience here as to whether or not any of you have received pushback from people who maybe don't want to return to the office, and how do you deal with that reluctance? But I think that the bigger question is, how do you create an environment that makes people comfortable? Because obviously a lot of us, me in particular, I've gotten really used to working from home over the last year and a half. I worked from home before that, but I find, working from home, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You don't have to deal with traffic. You maybe don't have to worry about what you're wearing as much as you would in an office, right? And so can we maybe help people out, people who have to return to the office, by creating an environment where maybe we somehow keep some of those things that they've learned to love about working from home? Like even before the pandemic, right? We had casual Fridays. So you had
Mm-hmm.
casual Fridays. Is this an opportunity to maybe take that to the next level somehow and bring even more of that, not necessarily casualness to the office, but somehow creating an environment where people maybe feel more comfortable at the office than they did before somehow? And how do you go about doing that?
For us, I think what's important is to really connect with the employees and really get their feedback so that they feel they're a part of the decision. You know, what is it they need to feel supported to come back? So whether or not that's a fear of, you know, health and safety, or it's a schedule issue, being able to figure that out together and then adapt. Certainly flexibility is going to be key, given, you know, it's a big transition for people that have been working from home since pandemic began, to get back into the swing of, you know, running off to work, facing traffic, facing children's schedules if they go to school, and busing and childcare and after school activities. Those are, you know, a lot of real things that people have kind of not had to deal with as much. So there's going to be, I think, a slow uptake, just getting used to that again. So I think in terms of productivity, there have been studies to show that has, you know, surpassed a lot of employers' expectations from people working remotely. So that's a good thing. And there are software tools to continue to check that. But I think that flexibility of people being in the office or a hybrid model, but continuing to connect and communicate with their colleagues and their employer will make this a more positive transition.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
agree that getting feedback from people and understanding what the specific things that would benefit them is important, and also really taking a look at what the business needs are too, and because that's both have to be satisfied.
I agree with both points, and that's one of the key things that we've been really focusing on here as well. Really making sure that we're listening to the employees, and then you got to balance that against the business needs at multiple different levels. Even the role an individual is in will have some level of impact to the amount of flexibility that can be offered or should be offered just based on the work expectations. So all of those things are playing a significant part. The comment around just making sure that we look at the environment of the office maybe in a different way coming out of this to ensure there's a place that individuals want to come back into, I think is really key. I was just on a call before coming into this session with our senior sponsors, and that was one of the key things we talked about. We know that the last year and a half, you know, we've all kind of dressed differently, ate differently, may have behaved differently. Coming back into the office is going to be a little different for us. And how do we make sure as we do that, that we're giving ourselves time to make that adjustment? And it can't just be, okay, you hit the switch and now we're back into a new model. We're going to need to really ensure that we pace with progress in terms of how we move back into this new environment that's going to allow us to be successful. And quite frankly, we're going to need to look at how we measure success in a different way in this new environment as well, right? Typically, you know, depending on how old your company is, many people look at work content as time I can see a person sitting in a seat versus, you know, what was the output of that person, regardless of how much time they sat in a seat. Those are the nuanced things that are going to be important as we shift into this new environment that we're going to need to make sure that we're striving for, and making sure that that becomes the way that we drive readiness into this new operating model.
Yeah, that was actually, before I let you guys go, that was the last thing I was going to ask you about, is measuring success. And how do we do that? How do you determine, you know, productivity, things like that, in say a hybrid model where you've got people who are working both in the office and from home, or people who are working in the office? So like you mentioned, Jade, there's research to show that some people can be more productive at home than they can be in the office, depending on the person, depending what they do. And before we wrap up for the day, do any of you have any thoughts on how we can go about measuring that? Obviously, I mean, that's a whole separate topic in and of itself, but are there some key strategies that employers can take to try and do that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on multiple dimensions. The basic one around just workplace performance, that's going to happen under your normal management processes. You know, those things don't change. I think how you assess and manage your workforce from a leadership standpoint may change, and how you communicate and the level and number of engagements you have, that may change. And that's going to be important. But when you're talking about the entire workforce, you know, things like org health surveys, And we've been doing these pulse surveys within our organization to make sure that we can get a sense of how is the organization doing? How are they feeling in the new environment? And then we're spending time in town halls also, so it becomes a sounding board for us, as was mentioned here, to make sure we're hearing from our employees what's working and what's not working so that we can make the adjustments. If there's one thing we do know is that going back in, it's going to be clunky, it's going to be different. And that's something we have to expect, and we're going to have to be prepared to manage it. And that's the way that we're looking at it and addressing it here at Corteva.
Yeah, I think for us, if we have a hybrid model, what's going to be important is the days that people are not present in the office, that the connection remains, that there will be organized meetings to be able to support one another and move things along in terms of project management, you know, the deliverables that and milestones, so that we know things are on track and that we can support one another should there be a need for help. That, you know, typically when you get up to go get a coffee, you say, you know, I'm just, you know, running out of time on this, or I need some support on this. So being able to do that outreach with remotely and continue that so that things don't fall behind will be important.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Craig, there. Sorry, Mark, were you going to say something?
Not much to contribute. I do think that the challenge is going to be replacing the eyeball test. So how, you know, is it done? Is it done well enough? And some of that stuff is just happening anyway, which is why many businesses haven't really missed a beat. But, you know, in some ways it might be more challenging to be hybrid than it is to be straight remote. We haven't had that here, but I think that, you know, that could be an interesting mix to deal with as well. And it would have to come down to some metrics which you can sort of use universally.
Yeah, I think, Craig, you used the word clunky, which kind of describes life in general. Nothing's ever perfect, and we all learn as we go, right? So it won't be perfect at first, but we will all find our way as we explore post-pandemic life as it slowly but surely begins to arrive. So thank you all for joining me today. That's all the time we have. If you missed part of today's live stream, don't worry, we'll have it available on demand via our website. If you have any questions about this subject or ideas for future topics we should tackle, simply message us via social media. Jade, Mark, Craig, thank you so much for your insights today.